York's classic rock. Q1043.
Wayne Kramer is here in the studio, and I'm sorry I don't really want to make you feel uncomfortable by acting like an excited fanboy, but I am. I'm from Detroit, Michigan. I've lived here in New York since 1974, but I'm from Detroit, and I am of the age that allowed me to experience the excitement of your band, the MC5, when I was going into the 10th grade. And it had a major impact upon the lives of me and my friends. And I've seen I've seen the MC5 perform in person, and here you are in my studio in New York, and I am excited.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. I'm thrilled to be here. Well, especially with a homeboy.
Well, you know, Chris, our producer, he loves hard rock, and I've spent time with him because he's considerably younger than I am. I've spent time with him showing him what are to him obscure videos on YouTube of bands from Detroit, and just to let him know what it was like when I was growing up. And for our friends who are listening to this, it's almost impossible to describe what was going on in the mid-'60s to early '70s in Detroit. Everybody in the world knows Motown and the music of Motown. But what a lot of people are absolutely unaware of is that there was this incredible rock and roll scene in Detroit. And there were all these bands. Now, every town has local bands.
Sure.
But there were all these bands that had gigantic hits on the radio. For instance, just a quick list here, and you'll know, I think, all of these bands. The Rationals, The Wanted, the Amboy Dukes. Well, they did eventually have a national hit. The Underdogs, the Unrelated Segments, SRC, also known as Scott Richard Case, Savage Grace, Frost, the Brownsville Station, Bob Seger and the Last Herd, the Stooges, Tea Garden and Van Winkle. Richard and the Young Lions were not from Detroit, but they were famous nowhere else.
Right.
They had a gigantic hit in Detroit, a number one hit in 1966 called Open Up Your Door. They're from New Jersey, where no one has ever heard of them. But they were on TV on Channel 9.
Yeah, they were a big hit in Detroit.
With Robin Seymour all the time. And, of course, we had...
Tidal Waves?
Oh, the Tidal Waves. Farmer John. Farmer John, I'm in love with your daughter.
These are great seminal garage rock standards.
But all of those bands were on the radio.
Yeah.
They were all on the radio, which leads me to the MC5. The first time I ever heard the MC5, I heard the MC5 on the radio, on Top 40 AM radio. In Detroit, those stations were CKLW and WKNR Keener 13.
Right.
The New York equivalent at the time would be WABC or WMCA. But these were on the radio. MC5, Kick Out the Jams, big hit.
Went to number 2.
Right. So, my friend Bill McCarthy, in the 10th grade, when I was going to Churchill High School, which was at the time housed in Franklin High School on Joy Road, he went out and bought the album. Everybody had just heard the single on the radio. He went out and bought the album. He dropped the needle on it, on Elektra Records. And he heard something very different from what he heard on the radio. So different that he had to bring the album to school, put it in his locker. And, you know, high schools do have places where there are turntables. And that's the first time I ever heard the actual Kick Out the Jams. Was in an empty classroom with a group of guys who were skipping a class so that they could hear what no one had ever heard on a record before. That is a 10th grade memory.
That is a 10th grade memory. That sounds very exciting. I mean, put myself in the place of that age, you know, and how compelling that would be in those days to actually hear someone use that kind of language, which is common language, exists in the world. We all
But we never heard it on a record.
But you never heard it on a record, or rarely heard it on a record.
Well, I never heard it on a record before then, and on a record from major label.
That's true.
Elektra Records. And it was not necessarily just for shock value. The MC5 as a band had evolved by that time into a unit that was very political.
Well, we embraced the same concerns as our audience. The things that worried them worried us. And we addressed those concerns directly. It wasn't a roundabout, hidden on the side. It was face to face. So when I stood on the stage and I put my hand up in the peace symbol or the power to the people fist salute, and the kids did that back to me, we were connecting, and we were connecting directly. I think that's the thing that set the MC5 apart from our contemporaries, who all shared our sentiments. You know, I think all young people of my generation felt estranged from our parents' generation in the handling of civil rights and the handling of the war in Vietnam, of cultural, outdated 50s sexual morality. But we addressed it straight on. You know, we sang about it. We made that connection.
Well, it seemed like you more than a fan base, the MC5 had a community.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. Yeah,
because you were very much a part of the whole scene that was taking place around you. You weren't, like really separated from the people like a lot of rock stars are.
Yeah. No, I saw it as an egalitarian approach to, a fellow amongst fellows, a worker amongst workers.
Mm-hmm. And it was really, even though academics argue about such things, it really was kind of the birth of punk.
Well, in our current iteration, what we think of as punk, but I struggled with the term for a while.
Well, and I understand why, and we can get into that in just a little while.
But if you think about it, Beethoven was a punk, Picasso was a punk. Everyone that was of the new generation that rejected the voice of the previous generation could be described as a punk.
Well, I understand that, but just sonically, speaking of the music, you were very unconventional. You were breaking the rules of rock and roll at the time.
Yeah.
You, along with the Stooges, I guess, historians can look back on that time and say that is, the genesis of what later became known as punk.
Mm-hmm.
And what made it differ from its progeny was its originality and authenticity. By the time you get to the Sex Pistols, you're talking about, even though, Sex Pistols are so great, they're punk, and they made good records, but the Sex Pistols were a manufactured band, that was cast. I mean, their manager dressed them in certain clothes and created an image for them on purpose to sell records. It wasn't organic like you guys.
Well, it was an art project. Art/commerce project.
No, but you understand what I'm...
I know exactly what you mean. I mean, the MC5 was self-motivated. This was something I wanted, I started the band, and it was, I saw it as a way for me to participate in a bigger world, to be a professional musician. Mm-hmm. I mean, my original goal was to work in nightclubs. That was, because that's all I knew. I mean, my mother dated guys that were professional musicians, and I would see them like at the music store where I went to get guitar lessons as a kid. The professionals would come in and get new strings or drumsticks and talk about what happened last night at the club. And I thought, wow, that sounds so exotic, Wow, I'd like to be at the club, and in the third set they did this, and then this guy played that, and so came and sat in, and that sounded like heaven on earth to me.
Meanwhile, you're a bunch of young kids, and suddenly you're on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine.
Yeah,
that was before your album came out.
Or we ever dropped an album, yeah. and that that was a mixed blessing. I mean, I've heard it said that, all publicity is good publicity, but I'm not sure I buy it, because the story was this: they sent a young writer out, a college age writer who had never smoked reefer before, and we smoked reefer nonstop, morning to night, and so he got high with us and hung out for a couple days, and then went home and wrote this story, which was came off kind of like a cartoon adventure, where he was having trouble discerning what was real and what wasn't real, what was put on and what was a joke and what was sarcasm and cynicism. So it made us, I don't know, I wasn't thrilled with that article. I thought it made us look like clowns, which of course we were. We were clowns, absolutely. I'm still a clown, but I didn't. That article kind of bugged me a little bit.
Well, you had the Kick Out the Jams album. Then the album that I played on the radio the most when I was 16, I was working in Ann Arbor at a station there, and we played.
Or BAI.
We played. It was WOIA.
OIA.
WOIA.
Yeah.
And on a little dirt road.
Yeah. I remember it.
Yeah, south of Ann Arbor, in between Ann Arbor and Saline, and the Back in the USA album, we played the hell out of that one. Starting with Tutti Frutti, and that album, it wasn't as successful as Kick Out the Jams commercially, but when I listened to that album, it was very finely crafted, and sonically it holds up today.
Thanks. Yeah, the album was in some ways a reaction to some of the heavy criticism that we got in our own community. The rock writers and people that didn't understand what we were accomplishing with Kick Out the Jams, and I wanted to prove that the MC5 was the band that I said it was. That we were a great rock and roll band, maybe the archetype American hard rock band, and so we worked real hard on learning how to work in the studio. We didn't have much experience. We'd only done a few single sessions where you go in the morning, you cut both your tracks, you overdub the vocals, you mix it, and you're out in 3 hours.
Right.
That was the assembly line Detroit style. So yeah, Back in the USA, John Landau, of course, came in to produce it, and it was his first effort as a producer. So we were all learning. It was OJT.
And then the third album was not a commercial success, but critics have been raving about it ever since it came out.
Well, it's certainly the best album. By then, we had learned how to be creative in a recording studio environment, and a record is a different animal than a live performance. I mean, forgive me for being redundant, but Marshall McLuhan talked about hot and cool media.
Right.
And when you go to a gig, you're there. It's hot. You can smell the people and the sweaty and the lights, and you can feel it. You feel the humidity and the moisture and the sound and the action, and you're in it. That's a hot medium. Records are a cool medium, or listening to the radio is a cool. Podcasts are cool mediums. You're washing the dishes and you're listening. You're driving your car and you're listening. So the adventure is cerebral, and it's a different canvas, from performing live. We finally learned how to do that on the third album, and it's my favorite of the 3 MC5 albums. And it was a pity that Atlantic Records had given up on us at that point, because that album could have turned it around.
Well,
I could have been a contender.
But
I could have been somebody, Johnny. Instead of a palooka with a one-way ticket to Nowheresville.
Well, people can still buy High Time, can't they?
Not only can they buy it, it's being reissued this year in the part of the 50th anniversary celebration. In a box set with the other two on colored vinyl. Heavy gauge colored vinyl. Yeah, it's available.
Okay.
Very excited about that.
And, you said you could have been a contender. Well, you are. I mean, you've been nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 3 times.
Yeah.
Didn't get in yet, but you've been nominated 3 times. Kick Out the Jams is always, when music publications around the world put together their lists of the greatest, recordings of all time, that's usually on there. You as an instrumentalist have been, called one of the best. Well, it's not just called one of the best. Today's big famous musicians get all excited at the opportunity to meet you and play with you.
Hey, it's always great to be recognized for your work and to be, part of the community of working musicians. I mean, these are the people that I have worked with all my life, and the camaraderie and mutual respect of my fellow musicians is the most important thing I have, most valuable thing I have. And yes, you're right. The MC5 does have a place on the landscape. We are a bump on the horizon there.
Yeah, well, people go to a Foo Fighters show and there's Dave Grohl screaming out, "Kick out the jams!"
Yeah,
I mean, come on.
It's very exciting. Yeah, I'm thrilled that.
And who's a bigger star than him in rock right now?
He is just about numero uno at the moment. Yeah.
And
we just played in Europe. I've got a new lineup together to go out and celebrate 50 years of. It's been 50 years since we recorded Kick Out the Jams, and I have this great band with Kim Thayil from Soundgarden and Billy Gould, the bass player from Faith No More, and Brendan Canty, the Fugazi drummer, and our secret weapon, Marcus Durant from Zen Gorilla, and helped out by Don Was and Matt Cameron and a bunch of other special guests. But we just played some festivals in Europe, and Pearl Jam invited us to sit in the middle of their set in Belgium. For 80,000 kids, and both of our bands played Kick Out the Jams together, and that was fun.
Well, I imagine it would. But you're talking about rock royalty, and you're self-effacing, but they're treating you like rock royalty.
And I had to pay them all $100 each.
Okay, you probably couldn't afford any more than that, because it's an odd thing. Here's a question: You've been famous. You've been famous for 50 years. People have known who you are.
Yeah.
You've been famous for 50 years. You've been famous and dead complete broke at the same time.
Yeah.
You've been famous and wondering where you're going to sleep at night.
Listen, having been in the MC5 has not left any of us independently wealthy. The MC5 never pulled a golden horseshoe out of our rear end. We never had the big hit record, which is, I think, one of the things that endears us to people that are fans of anti-heroes.
Yeah, but you've gone through life well known, but really suffering some very hard times. As
do we all.
Well, you spent some time in a federal penitentiary.
Yeah, we all don't go to prison. That's
right.
True.
And I mean, I can't even imagine the pain and the despair that one would feel.
Well, listen,
under those circumstances.
When I went to prison, there were 350,000 people in prison in all of America. Today, there's 2.3 million of our fellow mothers, fathers, children serving time in America's prisons. And I don't believe it's going to help any of them. Prison is a medieval concept that persists and persists. And certainly I believe in the rule of law. I believe in safe streets, and I believe in being held accountable if you break the social contract. But I think the punishment should fit the crime, and that's the last thing we do in this country.
Well, you were convicted of
illegitimate capitalism.
Drugs.
Yes, I tried to make some money selling some powders and potions.
Okay.
And I was a complete failure at it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that the 4-year prison term for what could be arguably considered a victimless offense was mighty severe.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people today that are serving life without the possibility of parole for the exact same offense.
Now, people talk about different levels, different kinds of federal prisons. And from, newspaper and magazine articles, television programs, no doubt people have heard of the so-called country club prisons. And someone who I know personally was sentenced to one of those country club federal prisons, and it was also a drug charge. And in his particular case, somebody kept badgering him, asking him if he knew somebody who could sell him any coke, and he finally picked up the phone and called somebody, and the phone was tapped.
That's how they do it.
Blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so he went to the country club prison.
Yeah.
And I spoke with him afterwards, and he told me there is no such thing as a country club prison. When you are in prison, you cannot leave. Your life is
you belong to them.
Right, and that it's a myth. The idea of a country club prison, maybe they have softer mattresses. Who knows? But it ruined his family. It ruined everything, the time that he spent.
Prison terms are terribly destructive to families. And he's right. There are no country club prisons. Prison is because the very concept of losing your liberty. I mean, that's how we're held accountable. Mm-hmm. We lose our liberty for a period of time. We're sent to prison as punishment, not for punishment.
Well, the theory is also that it's supposed to be rehabilitative.
Yes and no. When I went to prison in 1975, the plan was rehabilitation, and I was offered an array of group therapy, self-improvement programs, educational possibilities. You could get a Pell Grant and take college courses, correspondence courses. We had teachers from the University of Kentucky that would come in and teach classes. But during my sentence, about in halfway point, word came down from Washington that rehabilitation was ending, and the focus now will be accountability. And that was the beginning of the ratcheting up of the drug war, and that we're going to start warehousing human beings. And rehabilitation has been out of the picture for the last 30 years. It's slowly returning now. And I'm on the cutting edge of that work. We founded a 501c3 nonprofit in California almost 10 years ago, and we work across the country in correctional facilities using creativity in the form of songwriting as violence prevention and prisoner rehabilitation to give people a chance to express complex ideas, uncomfortable feelings, maybe even the reasons that they ended up in that prison, to figure out what they could do to make sure they don't come back to these places again, to be able to make the necessary changes, the correcting part of corrections.
And to express themselves through music might
through
be...
a positive way, to add something of beauty to the world.
And it's called Jail Guitar Doors?
Jail Guitar Doors, yeah.
USA? And is there a website?
There is, jailguitardoors.org.
Okay.
You can go there and learn all about who we are and what we do, and you can help us. You can make a donation. If you're a musician, I'd be happy to talk to you about setting up a chapter in your own community. We'll walk you through the entire process of getting instruments into the prison, of getting teachers in. We'll give you a curriculum that we use. We'll come and help train you. It's... We're in about 120 American prisons now.
We're
here in Rikers Island in New York. We just launched.
Which is that's not a prison, it's a jail, but it's one of the worst in the whole United States. Or,
in the world,
well, maybe in the world. Yeah.
We're in the L.A. County Jail. We're in the Cook County Jail in Chicago. And we're in we just launched in Detroit, too. Our hometown.
Yeah. Wayne County Jail?
No, in the Michigan Department of Corrections.
Oh, okay.
It used to be called Ryan Prison. It's now called the Detroit Reentry Center.
All right. Wayne Kramer's book is called The Hard Stuff. Now, before you were busted on a drug charge and sentenced to prison, you were already on the federal government's radar because of your political activities. As a part of the MC5, you were allied with John Sinclair and what was known as the White Panther Party. Their headquarters was 1520 Hill Street in Ann Arbor, a house where I learned to hate the taste of brown rice.
You didn't put enough seasoning in it.
Oh, boy, tasted like gook.
You got to put some curry and raisins in there.
John Sinclair, leader of that party, and prior to that, Translove Energies. John Sinclair was serving time in Jackson State Prison, when I knew the people who were there. Lenny Sinclair, his wife, the noted photographer, was the matriarch of the place. Yep. And but it was a situation where Pun Plumundon, one of their members, was on the FBI 10 most wanted list. I mean, they were a radical political group, and the MC5 was closely allied with them for a while. And I imagine you came under certain federal scrutiny at the time. Oh
yeah, I've since got my FBI files, much of which are redacted. Pages that are redacted.
Can you remember any of the redacted parts from the clues you get from the unredacted parts?
because what was happening was the Mitchell Justice Department under Richard Nixon, in league with J. Edgar Hoover of the FBI, had instituted a program to disrupt domestic dissent. They thought they could control people's opposition to the war in Vietnam, people's enthusiasm for civil rights, for voters' rights, for people of color. And so they systematically tried to dismantle all opposition group. Anyone that objected to government policy was a target, and the White Panthers came under that.
And for our friends who have no idea what we're talking about, the White Panthers were not a white supremacist cult. They were a leftist political organization.
Yeah, we were allied with the Black Panther Party.
Right.
The Black Panthers said there needed to be a group in the white community to do parallel but separate work.
Right.
And we said that was us.
Right, but if you say that today, people get all confused. You're talking about the White Panther Party.
No, on the contrary, we were anti-racist, anti-imperialist, pro-environment. We were pretty wacky, but there was a serious side to it because it gave us a voice to express our frustration with the slow pace of change. I mean, I felt like everything I did was patriotic at its core. Democracy requires participation. If you don't like the way something is, then do something about it. Go out, organize, get your friends together, do whatever you need to do to get your ideas across. If that means putting pressure on elected leaders, put pressure on them. If that means running your own candidates, run your own candidate. If it just means voting the people you don't like out and the people you do like in, there's something to do there. And I felt like that's what we were doing. We were trying to correct the ship of state, which was somewhat out of control.
Wayne Kramer is with us. The book, The Hard Stuff. This is, I would imagine, not an easy task, writing about yourself and your friends in an honest way. I mean, you certainly don't run away from any of the difficult things that you might have to discuss.
Well, I didn't want to write you can't candy coat this stuff.
Well, sure you can. A lot of people do.
Well, fair enough. A lot of people do. And so one of my goals in writing this book was to not do that. Your mistakes are how you learn. You can't accomplish anything if you don't make mistakes. And I wanted to show, as honestly as I was capable of, that I got it wrong a lot, and I still get it wrong a lot. I am imperfect on a good day.
Well, was there ever a time? I mean, you talk about addiction.
Yep.
Being an addict, and you're an artist. Was there somewhere in your young, confused mind? Was there the allure of the romanticism of the tortured, addicted artist, or did it just sort of happen to you? Because
I read William Burroughs and read about other criminals and lowlifes and hard drinking authors, Hemingway and Byron and the whole history of drugs and creative people. None of that caused me to be an addict. What caused me to be an addict is I like the effect of those potions when I put them in my body. That's what creates addiction. It's not reading about them or seeing them on TV or talking about them. I like the effect of the drugs. Life brings some pain with it. There's no, the Buddhists say life is suffering. And at a time in my life, I was in my early 20s. I mean, we know now that in your early 20s, your brain isn't even done growing.
Right.
And my life had collapsed, my way to make a living, the MC5, my career, everything I'd worked on since I was 13 years old went away. The band broke up, and this is not unusual. Most bands break up. Mm-hmm. Most bands don't have the FBI tapping their phones and are, dealing with the police department on a daily basis. But the MC5 did, and one day it all went away, and I suffered incredible grief from that loss. I lost my best friends. I lost my brothers. I lost my community, and I was in more pain than I was even conscious of. I only know this stuff in retrospect.
Right.
When I wrote the book and go back and review what happened. And clearly I was suffering from something that could be akin to PTSD. Having been through so much at such a young age, I've been traumatized by a lot of stuff. And then being hung out to dry. And I discovered that, these substances, alcohol and opiates, killed pain. And that's what I had at my core. I was a bundle of self-pity and regret and resentment. And I got some relief when I got high. So, getting high became my solution, not my problem. The only trouble with using drugs and alcohol as a solution is they have side effects. Prison, homelessness, illness, early death, those kinds of side effects.
And yet today, as I look across the studio at you, you're a happy family guy, dad, activist. There's a bit of philanthropy that's involved here as well. I mean, you've just created a new you from what was left that was really great of the old you when you stripped away the bad stuff? Yeah.
I stayed out there a long time. I didn't get sober till I was 50. I'm 70 today. And I think I kind of aged out. In prison, there's a condition that we've noticed that we call aging out, where guys, they get to be around 50, they're kind of over being gangsters and tough guys and slick and hustlers. They just want to get out of prison and have a wife and have a house and maybe a job and have a nice life. And I think that's part of what hit me is it was developmental. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I knew that if I kept on the way I was going, I wouldn't live much longer. And I had a lot I wanted to do. I'm still ambitious. I've always been ambitious. And I found a way to live where drinking drugs wasn't necessary, and I was able to start to build a life. And you're right. I enjoy joy from time to time in my life. I have some sense of fulfillment and accomplishment in the things I do, and I value most my relationships with other people.
Now, of the MC5, there are two surviving members.
Just one. Oh, me. Yeah, me and Dennis.
Right.
Yeah.
Two surviving members of the MC5.
Correct.
And the 50th anniversary is upon us.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a big celebration planned with a tour by MC50.
MC50, yeah.
That was a lucky name, right? I mean, the other bands on their 50th anniversaries, they don't have, it's not so easy. You MC5, add a zero.
It's interesting because I thought, well, okay, it's kind of clever, And then we had promoters say, oh, don't use that. Nobody will know who the band is. And we said, don't be silly. Everyone will understand it's MC5, mm-hmm. MC50. Mm-hmm. But it turns out they were right. Like, some people didn't know who MC50 was.
Well,
They
did you do
didn't connect it.
MC50 and then down underneath MC5 50th anniversary?
Well, we found some workarounds with the graphics and ways to try to clarify that.
Well, within our area, you're going to be on Long Island at the Paramount September 14th.
Yeah.
In Huntington, which I understand is a beautiful venue. In Philadelphia, September 15th at Union Transfer, but then September 17th at Irving Plaza.
Yeah, great venue.
And the final show of the tour is going to be in Detroit at the grand reopening of the Fillmore Detroit. Now, where's the Fillmore Detroit? What did it used to be?
I think it was the Fox Theater downtown. It was the Fox or the Michigan or the State.
Okay, well, the Fox Theater is still the Fox Theater.
Then maybe it was the State. There were all those.
Yeah, there were all those grand movie palaces.
Yeah, grand movie palaces from the 30s downtown. And today one of them's a terrific venue to play in. Sight lines are fabulous. Sound is incredible. And that's the weekend that we recorded Kick Out the Jams 50 years ago. So yeah, it's very, very exciting. And if you had told me 50 years ago that this was possible, I would have said you're insane.
Today is the release date of the book, The Hard Stuff, and you will be at the Strand this evening at 7 p.m. What a world-famous bookstore that is. What a great bookstore.
What a great honor. Yeah, I'm thrilled.
But you can spend hours just walking around that
I know.
place.
I love bookstores.
I do too. And that bookstore is so great because it allows for serendipity. You can walk in there without having any idea what you might be interested in and walk out with armfuls of books.
It's a sign of a good bookstore.
That you're going to love.
Yeah.
And you're going to be speaking with Adam Davidson of The New Yorker.
Yeah, my friend Adam Davidson, the great investigative journalist. He's the guy that broke the Trump Azerbaijan tower scandal story. And a number of others. Adam's the best.
And you also have a contest at MC50th.com/contest. You have a bunch of items for giveaway, and there's no purchase necessary. You just put in your email and zip code, right?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of items? You say, you have items for giveaway. Like, give me an example.
Well, I think the main thing with the contest is a Fender Stratocaster. That's a Wayne Kramer Stars and Stripes signature model.
Mm-hmm.
A few years ago, Fender produced about 600 copies of my Strat, which they did a beautiful job on. I mean, it's weathered, it's antiqued.
Mm-hmm.
It has the exact same pickups as I'll be using on the tour. They really took great care to faithfully reproduce the guitar. So one of those will be available. They were out of stock. We found the very last one at the Fender warehouse, and we snatched it. So that's available. I think things are like posters, pins. I think the book is available in this contest. So it's all that kind of rock, memorabilia.
Okay, let me give everybody the address one more time to enter.
MC50th.com, right?
Yeah, MC50th.com/contest.
Yeah.
And Irving Plaza, September 17th, right here in Manhattan. Paramount on Long Island, September 14th. One of the experts say one of the top 100 rock guitarists of all time for a kid like me from Detroit. One of the greatest. You don't need to put a number on him. He's just Wayne Kramer of the MC5. The book is The Hard Stuff, Dope, Crime, the MC5, and My Life of Impossibilities. Mr. Kramer, thank you so much for dropping by.
Jim, it's an absolute pleasure, and it's not just because you're a homeboy, but I appreciate the opportunity to be on the radio and talk directly with all our mainline mellows out there, and I look forward to seeing everyone at the gig. And thanks for all the kind things you said. That was really inspiring. I appreciate
Real
it.
heartfelt, and thank you.
New York's classic rock, Q1043.